Former Senator Len Harris has been fighting for the rights of all property owners across Queensland. In 2019, the state government made serious changes to our Land Act, which has stripped Queenslanders of their right to hold proof of ownership for their properties because those papers are now invalid. Len says that there is a huge danger in what the government have done, because now that our paper property deeds are void and worthless, there is a huge insecurity in having the only proof of ownership held online. Not only is it held online, but it's also not even held by the government. It's held by private companies, 3 in particular. And if you want proof of ownership of your property at any one time, then you need to pay these companies to provide you with a digital copy that expires after 30 days. These changes were made without consulting us. So Len has taken action to push the government to revisit and reverse these changes, and he's doing this via his Supreme Court case. Welcome, Len. Thank you for joining me today.
That's my pleasure, Melissa.
Excellent. Well, look, I'll start with the first question. How did you become aware of the amendments that were quietly pushed through in 2019 to the Queensland Land Act of 1994?
Well, there were 2 actual issues that triggered me looking into the incident. The first one was a personal friend asked me if I would speak to a young family who were being evicted from their parents' property. Sadly, their mother had passed away and their father was, because of business requirements, was in New Guinea. So we're talking about 5 absolutely lovely young adults. I think the youngest was about 18 and the eldest was about 28. And so I'll refer to them. Leon was is the one that I've been in contact with. So to get an understanding of what rights the mortgagor, that's a gentleman who provides some funding to their parents, I needed to find out what his rights were, and then also what rights the family itself had. To my surprise, when I went to the 1994 Queensland Land Act and also the Lands Title Act 94, there was no reference in it whatsoever to mortgages. And that's what actually really triggered it. As well, I was speaking to another friend who had divided his property. I won't say where, but so paid for the survey. The survey was all registered, did the application, and when it came to actually settled, he asked for the deeds, and they said, well, there aren't any. So that was a bit of a shock to him and also myself. It took me about 6 weeks, and there used to be an old phrase, oh, something falls off a truck. Well, we now have the modern day version of that. I get emails and people will say, oh, Len, are you aware of this act or that act? And that was how I actually became aware of the, and it's a bit of a tongue twister. So it's the Land, Explosives and Other Legislative Amendment Act of 2019. And as soon as I read that, I was absolutely horrified.
Yeah.
Because in so starting with the first, we'll call it, and it is an amendment, they actually removed out of the Land Titles Act the ability for the government itself to produce a certificate.
Interesting.
So by their own legislation, the Queensland government can no longer issue title deeds. So then the next one in chronological order was they omitted equitable mortgages from the Land Title Act. And that was what I was actually looking for. So what does equitable mortgages mean? Well, it means quite simply that both parties have agreed. So for a mortgage to be equitable, the lender has to be happy with the details, and the person borrowing then likewise must be happy to make the repayments. Well, there's no provision now in Queensland for the Queensland government to record mortgages. What they have done is an absolute deprivation of their responsibility. They have handed that responsibility over to the federal government, who has neither constitutional power over land use or statutory power. So they've achieved that through, it was originally achieved through COAG. Now, COAG has been disbanded now, and it's morphed into the National Cabinet. And to this point in time, I've been unable to find any linkage to the equitable mortgages. So that's how I became involved with the process.
Right. And really to understand that for everyday people like myself, you know, I mean, that's just a huge amount of information to rifle through, and that must have taken you quite a while to sort of get to that point with going through all of that paperwork.
Yeah, yes. What I initially did was I thought, well, I knew of and had the ability to lodge an application in the Supreme Court. I approached the registry in Cairns, and the people there were very, very helpful, particularly after I allowed them to read the Act, because they all own homes as well. So
it affects all of us.
Yes, I walked out of there with all of the forms, the actual numbers of the forms, etc., to fill in. And I don't know whether it was because of my terrible looks or my grey hair. They also even provided me with the application to set aside the fees, or partially set them aside. So instead of it costing me $1,020 to actually apply, it was only $136 as a pensioner. So I walked out of there beaming.
Wow. Okay. And could you tell us what are the three companies that actually hold the proof of ownership of our properties? Because you said, you know, it's not the Queensland government that hold it online. It's one of three companies. Yes,
that's correct. What the Queensland government has done, and I'll just explain a little deeper now, what the Queensland government has done is actually house the legal title in one of three private computers. Then that leaves us with, as we have in the past, had our actual physical deeds, and on the original parchment ones, all of the mortgages were, in the real sense, attached to the title. Well, they are no longer attached. The mortgages now are no longer attached to the physical record of the deed. So the three companies that are currently, as we're speaking, holding the actual legal title So the first one is Property Exchange Australia Limited. Now that means that that particular company is not even registered on the stock exchange. It is, it is a completely private company. The second one is Purcell Partners Proprietary Limited. So you can actually find who are the directors of that company, when it was registered, and if you pay even more, you can get quite a bit of information on Purcell Partners.
Just on Purcell, are they Australian owned, do you know?
Correct, yes, they are.
Right, okay.
They're Purcell Partners Proprietary Limited is registered with ASIC, and as I said, you can access who the directors are, when they've made changes, you know, if they were changing their position, their office, all of that is all there. The third one is simply Australia Proprietary Limited, and they are exactly the same again. So the major one, the first one, Property Exchange Australia Limited, is also known by its acronym PEXA.
Right.
Yes. Now, PEXA is actually held by another company called Lind, L-I-N-D, Link, L-I-N-K.
Okay.
And they hold 44% of the shares, even though it is not listed, it is still a shareholding company. At the present moment, they are in the throes of assessing whether they will do an initial public offer. Go back to earlier in the year, around May and June, they were considering having a share issue of $1.8 billion. That now, the last I have seen was that the 20th of October has now been lifted to $2.3 billion of shares. Now that's a massive amount of money.
Yeah.
So my question is to PEXA, who is going to actually peel off that amount of money, put their hand over their heart and say, we're doing this to secure Queensland landowners' titles? Well, that is not going to happen. They are going to want to what is called monetize their asset.
That is scary.
Yes, that is the scary part. Well, there's more than that. All companies, if PEXA goes ahead and does become a proprietary limited company, the first thing is they are then exposed to hostile takeovers. So somebody will come along and say, for arguments, a share is worth $5 and they offer them $6.50 per share. There's nothing to stop the shareholders selling their shares. And that's how a hostile takeover occurs. The other problem also is that earlier this year, a group of hackers actually placed 8.3 billion people's, not only their passwords to whether it's in LinkedIn or there's quite a few other entities that were hacked. They also have the person's personal details.
Wow.
So that is sitting out there in the web, in the dark web. So when you work out that there's approximately 7 billion people in the world, and not all of them have computers, it's fair to assume that your and my, some of our passwords and our identity is amongst that 8.3 billion passwords. So that's the real. So that's one side of why I believe the Queensland government is absolutely abhorrent in doing what they've done.
Yeah, and it's a huge risk for mischief, you know, like how can, you know, I mean, I think this is really, you know, it's a huge breach of trust to the people of Queensland.
Correct. And particularly with something like that, if they had have gone through the process of doing a white paper and put it out there for public consultation, morphed it into green paper, they could turn it into pink or purple paper if they wanted to, but they didn't because they knew what the answer would be.
Nobody would have agreed to it. No way.
No, of course we wouldn't. So that is only one part of the problem.
Yeah.
Previously, when we actually had, well, I'd say their crappy paper certificate, right? We could actually walk into a titles office and transact with that. So now we don't have that. You and I don't have access directly to one of the three companies. So if we want to do something, then we have to go and pay for somebody to access the computer.
Our own information.
Correct. So currently, you can, through the Department of Natural Resources in Queensland, and I'll add also in here now that every person who owns a property in New South Wales is now in the identical situation that we are in Queensland. As of the 11th of October, the New South Wales government has also ceased issuing titles, and they have also cancelled all the existing titles, same as Queensland has done. So this will be like Topsy or Dominoes. It's going to go through Victoria, South Australia, Western Australia. They were all sitting there waiting for 2 years to see if any riffles or major objection occurred in Queensland. And when it didn't, primarily, I believe, because we had no knowledge of it, then everybody else is on the bandwagon. The real danger lies in the future. As I said before, when we had a title, whether it was parchment or paper, right, we could walk into a titles office and transact with that. 20 years' time, 30 years' time, I know, well, no, hang on, I'm going to be around a while to annoy him. But eventually, you know, in 30 to 50 years' time, when everybody in Queensland and New South Wales, and probably all of the other states, when we have passed on, where are our descendants going to go to actually get the title transferred into their names? That will be ultimately the really big problem.
Yeah, and if we have a situation where things are hacked and information is lost and it's not being held anywhere else, then we can't prove that we own our house. There's no paper trail.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. And what do you say, Len, to people who say, you know, it's more secure to have this, you know, in a digital format? What if our house is burned down or we lost our title? It's better to be digital. Sort of what do you say to that?
Well, in actuality, very, very few titles are lost.
Yeah.
Because quite a lot of them are actually under mortgages, right? And the mortgage in the old system was actually attached to the title itself, right?
Right.
It is no longer the case. It beggars belief that there hasn't been a reaction from people who are lending. So there has to be some way that they can secure their money. So that is a whole different ball game again.
Yeah.
To the people who say, well, it's actually, I like it this way,
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about it, right? I say to them, why should I, and so far it's more than 95% of the people that I've spoken to, why should we have a right taken off us to actually cope for somebody who is so bloody useless that they cannot even secure a title for the home that they live in? Come on.
And why can't we have both options? Like, I'm not against moving forward into the future and having a digital copy, which I would not want held by a private company, but by our own government, and also having a paper title. What's the danger in us having that and also having digital, as a backup?
Whatsoever. And in the application to the court, I have not asked for the electronic to be done away with.
Yep.
I most certainly have asked for a directive from the court to direct the Queensland government to return to storing all the title deeds on a government computer. And as a result of that, I actually put a provision in there for a 12-month period in which the Queensland government cancels the contract with these people who are actually holding the title deeds now.
Yep. Yep. And that was actually going to be my next question. I know that you started filing your application in the Supreme Court earlier on in the year, and you were asking for a judicial review, and you had your first court appearance on the 17th of September in the Cairns Supreme Court. Are you able to tell us what happened on that day and what's happened since then?
Yes. Well, I was what's the wording? Caught out is a good example.
Yeah.
Because the solicitors representing the Queensland government, and I'll just clarify here, I refuse to refer to them as Crown Law, because if they were actually representing the Crown, they would be standing on my left-hand side in the court, representing you and everybody else in Queensland. But they're not. They are opposing what I am actually doing. And that's an absolute oxymoron. To be called Crown Law. So you're not upholding the rights of the citizens or the Crown from whence we derive our rights. They're in there doing the absolute impossible, and that is justifying the Queensland government who's done something that's totally wrong. So anyhow, they had the audacity to actually file in the registry a set of draft orders.
Okay.
And the judge, Justice Henry, said to me, Mr. Harris, do you have a copy of the draft order? I said, well, no, Your Honour, they haven't provided me with them. So he sent a lovely young attendant from the court out. She came back with a copy for me. And then the judge started to look at these draft orders. And the first one was to have the actual application. When I say it's my application, in the application I stated that it is myself, Leonard William Harris, for and on behalf of the Queensland people.
Right.
So it's not me in that court arguing for our rights. It is every person in Queensland who wishes to have their properties back are standing there with me.
Yeah.
So I watched the judge, and he actually had a biro, a pen in his hand, and I saw him run it across the page. And that was the first draft order to have our application struck out. And his comment was, well, that's not happening today. And I went, thank goodness for that. So, and then later on, he made a couple of funny other comments as well. So I've found Justice Henry to be just and equitable.
Okay.
So he's obviously balancing the rights of the Queensland government against the right of us as the citizens.
Yeah.
So he then set a day, or set a whole series of functions I had to provide for the court, affidavit evidence, and then on a certain day I had to provide an outline of our arguments, which I have done all of that. So we had another hearing on the 27th. So the first one was 17th of September,
Right.
27th of October. We had the second hearing. The Crown, well, the lawyers for the state had by that time withdrawn the application to have it struck out. So then all of the other 9 orders then stood in place. So I've complied with all of those. So on the 27th, Justice Henry set down the 30th of this month, 30th of November, for the actual hearing of the case. Again, the lawyers representing the Queensland government just sat there muted for the entire 15 minutes until right at the end. Then they, through Justice Henry, asked his permission to ask me to put in a 78B notice. Now, the effect of that is, and I have to this point declined to do that yet. I'm still seeking legal advice as to the effects. Like, I know what the effect is. The effect of a 78B notice in the Supreme Court allows every Attorney General in every state in Australia to apply to be a respondent along with the Queensland government, and also allows the federal Attorney General on behalf of the Commonwealth government to actually become a party. So the effect of that is that whatever decision Justice Henry makes, either for us and asking the state government to actually withdraw the act, or if he finds in favour of the Queensland government, that then affects every state in Australia.
It will set a precedent and they will use this case. Wow.
Yes. Anybody else challenging their right to actually have paper deeds. Yes, so that's the history of the case, of the hearings.
Yeah.
I feel that Justice Henry has been very well correct in everything as he has proceeded, and again, it will come down to his decision on the 30th of this month.
Okay, so you do you need to make that decision about, was it the 78B by
Yes,
the 30th of
very
November?
important.
Yep. So
yes, has to be.
okay, and so what should we expect from that case, from that hearing on the 30th of November?
Well, if the 78B, in other words, if I go ahead and lodge the 78B application, then I believe in all probability the case will have to be set back an absolute minimum of 6 weeks.
Right.
Because each of the states have to prepare their argument as well as the Queensland government. And the interesting thing is the Queensland government still has not put forward an argument as to why we are not entitled to have our title deeds.
Yeah. So if you don't agree to do the 78B, which would then keep it just within the state, would that
Yes.
not be more beneficial for us?
Well, not necessarily for us, but what it would do would be to still leave the door open for the people in every individual state to actually commence an application for a judicial review in their state.
Yeah. So it seems to me agreeing with this would probably not be in the best interest of the community in Australia.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
The other side of that situation is in the case where we are successful, then it actually binds every other state to cease doing, well, not cease having their electronic lodgement, but what it would do is it would require them to, again, and I can't see why they can't run, as you said earlier, in parallel, have the electronic lodgement, but give us back proper, and I'm not talking about their crappy bits of paper.
Yeah.
That's not going to last 100 years. Like I have a title deed from a lovely, lovely lady in Mareeba, right? Which is the original parchment deed that was issued for her property in 1923. It is nearly 100 years old. Perfectly usable. It has all of the mortgages all the way through, right from 1923, right until this lady has actually, she and her husband purchased it. They cleared the mortgage.
Yeah.
And the mortgage was removed off the deed, as it should be. Then in 1990, and this astounds me, the Queensland government put a stamp on her parchment deed that said owner's copy of title cancelled. Now, I just realised I'm in the situation where I'm actually going to run out of battery on my phone. Dean, could you grab the charger from me and plug it in over here so I can you'll have to flip this a little bit out.
That's okay.
It's suddenly gone very dark on you.
Okay. So battery issues have been sorted. So, Len, you said earlier that the Queensland government had been moving public assets into private hands. Are you able to elaborate on this?
Yes, in actuality, and going back to my earlier comment that we have the modern day things falling off trucks. Night before last, I received a message asking me, Len, are you aware of the Queensland Futures Fund (brackets Title Registry Act) 2021? And the answer obviously to that was no, I wasn't. So immediately downloaded the act, and what I find equally as astounding in relation to everything that the Queensland government has done up until now, cancelling our titles, this act, the Queensland government is actually establishing a proprietary limited company. And they have established before what they call statutory corporations. So we have that with Ergon Energy, we have that with Sun Water, with water. They are acting as a private company, but they are controlled and part of the Queensland government. Well, this one is a proprietary limited company, which again it is registered already on the stock exchange because it actually has an APN number. So why would the Queensland do that? Well, the answer is found in the Act itself. All of the fees that the government collects for registrations of titles is going directly into this private company. And then even more astounding, the Act itself clearly states that those funds don't go into consolidated revenue. It is the option. The Act names the company as the operator. It is up to the operator how they disperse those funds. It also, and this one is a real wake up to the people who work in the government entity itself as public servants. This Act gives the operator the right to transfer them out of their position as a public servant and make them an employee of this proprietary company.
Wow.
Who the hell do they think they are? So, yes, there's the bomb.
Yeah, that is mind-blowing.
It is.
And they're doing all of this without any public consultation. They're not publishing any of this information. They just really just become so bold. You know, I urge everybody to look into this. What was it called? The Futures?
Queensland Futures Fund.
Yep.
Open bracket, titles, registry, closed bracket, Act 2021.
Perfect.
And I have here, and here is another really, really interesting thing. On the front of it, it has the reprint current from 1 July 2020. Our mischievous Mr. Peter Beattie passed a piece of legislation when he was Premier that allowed him to alter an act by reprinting it. There is a reprint act, which I am actually in the throes of getting copies of that. I'm not saying that's what's happened here.
Yep.
But it is possible that this Act, the Queensland Futures Fund, Titles Registry Act 2021, did not even see the light of day in the Parliament.
Wow. It just makes me ask another 1,000 questions. You know, who is behind all of this and why?
Yeah, well, it makes you actually sick in the stomach.
Yeah,
it does not feel good. So
it's almost impossible to believe or to fathom that this kind of stuff is going on.
Mm,
Wow.
yes.
Well, thank you. I hope people start looking into that, and I would be interested to hear what further information you get from that. Also, I wanted to mention before we wrap up is that you had mentioned that you're going to be doing a video chat tomorrow on Monday with Rod Cullerton. So I look forward to seeing that. I think you guys together on a video chat, you guys, both of you are so informative and knowledgeable. So I really look forward to tuning into that tomorrow.
Yeah. Just before you do go, Melissa,
Yep.
can I actually explain to people?
Absolutely.
That,
yep.
Yeah. I am of the belief that it is, irrespective of how correct my argument is in the court case, irrespective of what the lawyers for the Queensland government do in that process, this situation will not be remedied unless the Queensland people get behind this. It is going to be sheer weight of Queensland people saying enough is enough. We want this act withdrawn.
Yeah.
So the only way that they can actually do that is to go to my website, and I asked them to actually put in the 3 W's, the www.thesilentmajority.org.au and register on the site. We don't collect anything other than just your name, right? And obviously your email, because that's how you will actually access the site. This will be won or lost on either the Queensland people getting very, very bloody angry, or it will be lost because of their apathy.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, I just plead with people, get on the site and let us know what you want done. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Len. Thank you so much.